Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Welcome to Belvedere 21 and to this event dedicated to one of the most underestimated dimensions of public life, financial well-being. My name is Eva Weissenberger. I'm a journalist and entrepreneur, and it is a pleasure for me to guide you through this afternoon on behalf of Erste Foundation. This is not another study about financial systems or financial literacy. It's a study of financial well-being, how people feel, how people decide, how people live with money. What's new is that it approaches finance not as a technical field, but as a deeply human and emotional one. We'll hear from practitioners, from researchers, from policy shapers. We'll look at what works, what doesn't, and what it means to move beyond money. Please join me in welcoming our host, Boris Marte, CEO of Erste Foundation. The floor is yours.
Well, hello. Thank you for joining us for this, as Leonore said, grande finale of this 3-year journey. In the name of the board of Erste Foundation, I'm happy to welcome you all in this room, and I'm extremely excited to see such a fantastic group of people joining us here from the different entities, from the public side, from the private side, from the different countries, from Erste Group, from Česká, spořitelna. So it gives us a good feeling about what we have done in the last 3 years. It has been a journey. It has been an exciting journey full of surprises. And standing here, I would really love to thank the team, Adele, Leonore, Pello, for taking us through this journey of some fundamental research. And what we will hear today, I think, is extremely exciting. And we're looking forward to the final presentation of the final report, which, as we said, is not final, because basically it's a starting moment of now thinking about how we can learn from what you have created as a research report, and from which we can learn how to move on and where we can get better in our solutions, methods, and measures. And I think this is something which speaks to different constituencies, not only the private sector, but also the public sector or the educational sector. So we're very much looking forward to this type of presentation. This report is unique in its dimension, geopolitical, geographic dimension. It's new in its approach and its ambition. And it's inspiring in its insights and outcomes. And, you know, usually we, as representing different institutions, tend to see the world out of different lenses of an institution or of a view which is made by experience. But what we sometimes miss is something we call a holistic approach on having a comprehensive view beyond institutional boundaries. So we had the feeling that especially the discussion about financial literacy exactly got stuck in such institutional boundaries. So we're looking forward that to your presentation, and it was one of the intentions to not understand financial well-being through an institutional lens or an economic lens or through the lens of a public authority, but through 100% unconditional lens of the human being. And as we know today, this is easily said, but it's highly complex and highly demanding to understand and to understand the dimension of irrationality of how people take financial decisions. But I think this is the big achievement of this study, that it helps us to understand what elements at the end of the day are responsible for the fact, what cultural, social, or other elements are responsible for the fact how people take financial decisions. And I think this is the first step. To understand the problem always is the first step to design a solution. And the better we understand the problem, you have to fall in love with the problem, not the solution, as I learned. So we felt in love with the problem. And I think this is key to bring the whole discussion a step forward. So, and I think those three elements which were responsible in this, who brought us to where we are today, is the scientific rigor of the team, the cross-border approach, which is not easy. Usually studies of this dimension are only done in one language. We did it in 7 different countries, with 7 different languages. And we did it over 3 years, so we had a comparative approach. And I think these are key elements of the design of the study which brought us to this insightful gravity of the report we will listen to in some minutes. Because this is the step to create something which is lasting and which is fundamental, which not loses its actuality already next day, but something which stays. I think this is the key purpose of a foundation, to provide something that stays and has relevance for the overall society. And, of course, for the banking group, Erste Group, we represent. So I'm extremely happy that we have the chance to listen to you today. And basically, I want to hand over to the stage to you, Eva. I want to hand over to you, Eva. Once again, thank you for joining here. Thank you for joining on the live stream. And fasten your seat belts.
Many thanks for these enlightening remarks, Boris. Thank you. Now please join me in welcoming 3 more voices who have shaped this research journey, or as Boris said, this holistic approach. Dana Brandenburg, chair of the managing board at Česká spořitelna Foundation. Mihkel Solvak, vice dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences of the Sciences of the University of Tartu, and Leonore Riitsalu, project lead and behavioral scientist at the University of Tartu. Please. So, you don't have to sit down. Please stay here with me. So, give you a microphone. So, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. It's really nice to be here with you today and to see this room full of fans of financial well-being. I would like to start by saying that probably you expected somebody else. I'm obviously not Tomáš Salomon. Tomáš is really sorry he could not be here today, but he's sending his best and warmest regards to everyone, and also wanted me to pass on special congratulations, of course, on the findings of the study to the whole research team and to the Erste Stiftung. I would just maybe like to say a few words based on my personal experience with the project, because I was lucky to be able to follow the story of the project from the very beginning, so these whole 3 years. And I would maybe like to start by paying a tribute really to Leonore and to Boris, because it is a common knowledge now that the project started really with this famous talk of Boris and Leonore in Albach. Many things happen in Albach, I think. And they had this really truly revolutionary idea, I think. And in fact, they suggested something which was very simple, but yet profoundly very new, I think, to really look at the financial well-being not through numbers or data, but through the eyes of real people. And I think that this idea not only sparked the research project that we are celebrating today, but it's also sparked a more intense and a deeper collaboration on the topic of financial health within the Erste Group and its partners. And it was really a new impulse for us to think differently. And it was also an opportunity for collaborative learning. And I think that we really learned a lot during the last 3 years. And I can say it based on our own experience from the foundation of Česká spořitelna, because we started to work on the area of financial health about the same time as this project took off. And I must say that the project was really very beneficial for us in many ways, because I think that we were able to grow and develop our expertise and know-how alongside the project. And we already really used many of the insights from the project when building our own programs and tools in the area of financial literacy. So, for example, to be concrete, we already used the triad of financial well-being. You will talk about it definitely. We used it when shaping our competence framework for financial education, because as we know, for financial education, it is really important to have competence area-oriented approach, so something which is developing not only knowledge, but also skills and attitudes of people that can really then translate into different financial behavior in life. So all these things were very important, and I think when I have to congratulate to you on this final report, I think it is really very nicely done, very clear, very concise, nice graphics, everything, so I really like it a lot. I had a chance to now read it really, the whole report on the train coming to Vienna, and I think it would be really a shame. There are so many unique insights, and they are not meant to stay just on paper. So I think that what we now have to do, what should be our ambition and our goal, is to really translate this into our daily work, to really move from thinking differently, maybe about the topic of financial well-being, to acting differently, and it is something which is lying ahead of us. So I must say that we really enjoyed the work on this project, and I would also say that I'm very grateful for the relationship which was built through the project with Leonore, with Adele, with Pello, and with many others. So thank you very much for that.
Many thanks. Thank you. Please, Mihkel, Solvak, we're all ears.
All right, thank you for having me, and thank you for coming as well. I think this project was unique and still is obviously unique in very many ways. First of all, about the format of it, just think, university researchers, Erste Foundation, and a bunch of banks all joined together doing this type of work. Research obviously on the university side, but the vision and ideas partially by the foundation, and obviously the experts, very substantial part of the funding, but the most important part, the data from the banks as well, which is quite unique. I was struggling to find similar projects. I actually didn't. That's one thing that is unique about it, and definitely also the team composition. I would emphasize that as well, because of course, when doing research in international teams, that's a given nowadays already. but this particular division of labor. Leonore told me that she is going to try to get a specific type of data from Česká, spořitelna, and I told her, you're never going to get it. This type of data, transactional data, client account data, it's very difficult even to get within a country, let alone get it from a country and hand it over to researchers in another country who do research on it. But they managed to pull it off, and this is definitely something that is remarkable. And I would say any typical financial well-being researcher would be quite envious of this particular study. But this brings me to the content of the study as well. Any typical financial well-being research actually wouldn't do that study because it definitely wasn't typical. First of all, given the amount of data that was gathered, you can find it in the book and in the many publications that have come out and will come out based on this project. Very different types of data gathering methods, experiments, in-depth comparative interviews across countries, and as I already mentioned, super interesting transactional data, which provided insight, and there are graphs in the book on that as well. That's definitely one of the biggest benefits that's going to live on beyond this particular project, but I would also emphasize how they approached this particular topic. As Boris already mentioned here, this is not your typical applied study of financial well-being, but actually fundamental research on that particular topic. And I read a lot of applied studies, and I'm always sort of surprised how little actionable information you actually get from an applied study. But it's little because they usually look at small things, small changes. Some sort of different onboarding strategies, different user interface designs, different paths of clients through certain particular services. And based on those little findings, you change small things. And changing small things usually brings small effects. However, fundamental research actually provides much more actionable information because it generates a lot of hypotheses, a lot of fundamentally different questions which allow us to basically do things differently in a substantive way. That is what is important. Meaning being first in something, being truly different in something, meaning simply not telling that we are different but actually doing things differently. And as a result, probably being a bit better than others as well. So not in small things, but in fundamentally substantive differences. So to wrap up, if I think about the outlook or the future of this particular endeavor, then it definitely is going to generate a lot of citations for academics. That's important. But I presume, I hope it's going to be also cited as shown in the ERSTE study by Riitsalu and others. It's going to be followed up by others. So I actually urge the particular parties to this project also to follow up on what was found in this and then state those actionable hypotheses and find out what can we then actually do differently based on this fundamental different understanding. So if you don't follow up, someone else will. Okay. And to wrap up, on behalf of the University of Tartu, I would like to thank the Erste Foundation, obviously, in particular Boris, Marte and Marianne Schlögl, for the support that the research team was given. Obviously also the Erste Group and in particular Česká, spořitelna for the data, which is amazing, and the support, and let's not be light about it, the trust that they put into this research group, because otherwise this type of data won't change hands. And of course, obviously, the research group, Leonore, Adele, Rauno, thank you for doing this, and looking forward to reading your research on that particular topic in the future as well, because there will be still a lot of stuff coming out. Okay. Thank you.
Many thanks. Dana and Mihkel, you're welcome to return to your seats to the audience. So we've heard her name already 4 or 5 times. This is the famous Leonore Riitsalu, project lead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Tere. That is hello in Estonian, not some nasty word that I'm starting with today. I know that there are people watching in live stream also from Estonia, but also from other countries. So as Mihkel was saying, I know of some jealous financial well-being researchers who have been eagerly waiting to this day when finally we can publicly share our findings. So the day is here, the book is here. Those of you who haven't yet received it, it is there in the lobby. Please pick it up during the coffee break. And as Mihkel was saying, I'm really proud to say that I was a leader of a fabulous team doing fabulous research that is really rigorous, has had many stages, many different methods have been used, a huge number of very good partners has already been mentioned, but there were also people from Italy, from Tartu, from other countries that joined us during the journey. So I hope that some of you are watching on the live stream. So thank you for joining us on this exciting journey that started from this legendary talk in Alpbach. So already Mihkel mentioned the different methods that we used. Don't worry. This is basically the last time you hear the word method on this talk. Well, okay, Pello will say it once, but only once, please. It is going to be a brief overview and not an academic talk. So it is a challenge for us to really summarize it super briefly, but we will do our best. Still, I will say two complicated words, and I hope I managed to pronounce them on the stage while being a bit nervous. I do believe that we managed to actually shift the paradigm of financial well-being with our research. I do believe that we actually managed to take the attention from just financial affairs, financial services, financial education, and so on, and actually shift it towards humans, as already Boris was nicely introducing, and really to go beyond money. So as our title says, really beyond money, not just financial affairs. And it was also mentioned that this is a story of threes, so I have to repeat it again. So there, in the core team were three of us, so all of us will be sitting here in a 30 seconds time, let's say. And it took 3 years. We had 3 main phases of the research. So it was about understanding, assessing, and also influencing financial well-being. And we developed a triad. So a lot of threes are on this journey. So as Boris was saying, please fasten your seatbelt. We will fly quickly over 3 years, many studies. And I hope that you are ready for the grande finale of this fabulous, passionate research.
Thank you very much, Adele. Not Adele, Leonore, sorry. Please take a seat. We now move into the heart of this event, the findings of the Beyond Money research project. Please join me in welcoming Leonore's fellow researchers. Adele Atkinson, Professor of the Practice in Financial Literacy and Wellbeing at the University of Birmingham, and Rauno Pello, Managing Director of Open Future Lab. Before we begin, a quick note for those who would like to join this conversation later. You can submit your questions and comments anytime via Slido. We will see later a QR code, but well, maybe we see it now. No, we'll see it later. Okay, so then the floor is yours. Let's listen to your findings. We're looking forward to it.
Hi. I will say in the beginning, I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. I will get into it. Before I go, as there's been many mentions of these things that we started out as understanding, trying to understand what financial well-being is. But before that, we also checked what's out there and what is known and what is not known, and got to complicated, weird world of super many different terms. Financial resilience, financial health, financial anxiety, financial satisfaction, a lot of things that are used interchangeably. On top of that, there's a lot of different models and different forms of understanding and how to measure, assess these things. There's topics about stress, there's topics about today, about the future, different states. But what we found out, they're mostly based on institutional understanding. They're coming from the basically from the inside of whoever is trying to influence people. So basically, we didn't see much qualitative insights. And we found also extremely long list of gaps. These are just few of them. There's not so much information how our social norms, or how we live our life, how that is part of our financial life, and in that sense also part of our financial well-being. There's not much understanding of longitudinal data. We don't provide that also here, a little disclaimer, but there is a little bit. And what was missing is actually the everyday choices, the personality traits, how people actually live their life in the definitions of financial well-being. This was the biggest gap that we saw. And when we moved on, then we understood there is only one way to move forward and actually put people first, to see what happens in the heads and minds and souls of people, human beings. And we asked ourselves, and eventually asked a lot of people, how do actually people define financial well-being? What does it consist of? What's common understanding? What they share about it? How they think about it? How they live their life through it? All of those things. How did we do it? As I mentioned, as Leonore mentioned, we don't use many of the hard words, but I have to say once that we still had methodology. But basically, not saying all of these crazy, weird, complex words that are on the slide, we just talk to people. And we talk to a lot of people. And I have to shout out another partner in the game, Kantar Austria, who helped us to conduct all of these interviews. All of 630 interviews. And if somebody wants to know something revolutionary that we did, this is something. There is no study out there that has that size of a qualitative insight. On top of that, all those 630 people, they're completely different. They don't share anything common across all of the countries. There's 90 people from each country. We talk to people from the teenagers to the people in their end-of-life cycle, and everybody in between. Different social classes, different income levels, different employment statuses, people who are doing gig work, people who are doing traditional jobs, people who are not even working. So it's a massive, massive diverse thing. And what we were after is to find out what unites us as people, not what divides us. Because most of the times we got the question, so what are the country differences? And what are the things, how we all differ? But that wasn't the thing that we were out looking for. We were really trying to understand what unites us and understanding what financial well-being actually is and means to people. We talked to people. The talking took an hour-ish with different people. But what we brought in that is separate from the regular traditional financial well-being research part is that we actually talked about life. We talked about how people define their life, how do they feel, what they feel in their physical health, how they deal with their mental health issues, how they relate with the people around them, their family members, their friends, how they think about career, work, choices about life, and all of these aspects. And then we also did a little bit of money talk. So how do they actually save or invest, and what it means to them? And I will get into some of the insights that we got from there. Yeah, jump ahead. Key finding. Before I actually give you the actual understanding and the definition of financial well-being, there are a couple of things that everybody told us, and I would like to bust a couple of myths. Not everybody wants to be a millionaire. We need to deal with this idea that this is not the key, that we want to have super amounts of cash. And another thing, money for money's sake, just gathering a lot of money is widely frowned upon. If you take different social classes, different formats, it's not something that we aim for. Because we actually manage money because we have to, because life demands it, not because we enjoy and love doing it. It's just something that we need to do in order to live in the society and culture that we are living in. Income, steady job, is one of the crucial parts. So we have to have some kind of a format. And back to the human level, ideal, enough, and all of these other words, they're super personal. They're coming from inside people. There is no way to say that your ideal, my ideal, that one of them is wrong, because these ideals are something that we feel inside, they're subjective and ours. now the biggest finding, one of the biggest, before I define the financial well-being, there is a huge language barrier between the institutions, policymakers, and actual people. How we talk about things, what we mean about things, and what it actually means to people. I already mentioned money is a necessity. Money is something that we deal with because we have to. Savings are for security. Not for saving money, but it's actually giving us the feeling of security, feeling of at least being in a better state tomorrow than we are in today. Moving on to these things, debt is bad, profoundly negative, which also means nobody likes loans. There is no person who really, oh my God, I want to have a loan. There is no format. Nobody wants a mortgage. People want homes. They want things. They want the experience of life. They have no need for a thing that it's called loan. Of course, we're living in a society in a format that we need to deal with these things, but maybe we can frame them a little bit differently. Coming to the mortgages, at least in my own country, in Estonia, mortgage is called home loan, because it's a loan for getting a home. It has the idea of what we are after. And then getting to assets and financial terms. Assets are hard, tangible, holdable possessions. So basically, if you say asset to a person, it's real estate, it's gold coins, depending on the country. So if you want country differences, in Austria, there's gold coins. But in many places, it's focused on mostly real estate and all of the things that you can actually own, cars, yachts, there is a person who owning yacht, and all of the other things that you can imagine. And wealth, remember, nobody wants to be a millionaire, because wealth is about having everything else except the money. It's the experiences, the happiness, the family, the friends, everything that surrounds you. And the cool topic of today's world, we need to invest. But remember, if you tell something about investment to a regular person on the street, it's not about, oh, I want to invest into stocks and bonds and things. No, it's actually investing into themselves, into their families, into health, into education, not into financial products. So this is something that needs to be reframed and understood. There's a little call for everybody. I think it's time, banks, businesses, policymakers, everybody who's having an influence on financial well-being of people, it's time to start speaking human, not forcing people to speak finance. This is the key message to the financial literacy angle. This is the key message to selling products and services. It's not about helping people speak finance. It's actually figuring out how you can speak human to human with a person to a person. Finally, I got to the definition of financial well-being. That was a weird noise, sorry. So, went through all of the 630 interviews with many times. You don't want to know even how many words. But 15,000 pages, so it's a couple of Bibles, if you want to compare how much information came out. And what we found out is financial well-being is a triad. It's a triad of security, freedom, and pleasure. So it combines all of these three aspects. We can't pull them apart. What is different between people is that this balance of all of these elements is individual. Everybody of us, you there, people online, we all have a different understanding what is an ideal or enough balance of all of these elements. But what we found out from people that we all share, remember I told we want to see what unites us. This unites us. We all want three of those things in our life. Security, I think this is something that everybody will understand much more quicker. This is something that the financial well-being, financial health, and all of the studies have been focusing on. This is the having peace of mind about my money matters today, tomorrow, and in the longer future. Having enough to pay my bills, save something, put something aside for a rainy day, and all of these aspects. Makes sense. When we dug deeper into the data, we found also out that there's freedom, agency over your own life choices. So money actually doesn't dictate your life. It's something that you have power over. We know that we can't control the future, but we can prepare for the future. It has all of the elements. People are looking for having freedom to make choices about their life, their career. So it's a possibility. If I want, when I turn 50 soon, then I can change my career on the spot. This is the freedom that we are looking for. This is the freedom that people are after. How can I have this agency? And the third part, the magic of everything that has been forgotten completely. Because from the history we saw security dealt with freedom appearing in the messaging. But what is completely missing is pleasure. And show me a person who doesn't want to actually enjoy their life. And this is what we saw. While people were talking about financial matters, financial life, financial well-being, and their general understanding of well-being and how they live their life, it was quite clear that people want to enjoy it while they are still alive, not when they are in different magical places they are afterwards. It's more about enjoyment, actually having enjoyment. And enjoyment is not as, how do I put it politely and diplomatically, it's not something that the external factors are saying that you should buy pleasure and happiness and joy. It's more about spending time with friends. It's the small things in your life, but it's also the big significant pauses and enjoyments. It's actually enjoying your child getting married. Like all of these life situations, the life stages that you go through, this is something that people want to enjoy and cherish while they are moving on. So if you put all of these three things together, people need security, freedom, and pleasure in their life. And all of these aspects need to be taken into account when designing different product services, understanding, helping them, guiding them, listening to people, because also advice is a two-way street. You need to also listen before you give some advice. And remember, enough and ideal is super personal. There are a couple of extra levels and layers. There is a group of people, vulnerable people, who are in a survival mode. We know them, we have seen them, everybody knows that they exist. And unfortunately, they are not the people who are thinking about financial well-being. They're really trying to survive. This is the place that needs to be helped before we can even talk about financial well-being or financial health with people. We need to understand that there is a group of people that need help before getting to this side of understanding, even though the people in our group who were in the survival mode, they still mention the things. They're still dreaming of those things. But the thing is that financial well-being in this format is not attainable to them yet. And hopefully, all the policymakers, bankers, and everybody here online will help also those people to get to a point that they can actually try to figure out how to have financial well-being in their future lives and how to enjoy the life while doing all of these things. I've been saying financial well-being many times. And then there's the well-being part. But we found out it's hard to distinguish between financial well-being and general well-being. After going through all this data, what we saw is that they have a relationship that is, I don't know, bilateral, two-way, two-side. So it's a conversation between financial well-being and general well-being. They influence each other so much that sometimes it's hard to distinguish which one we are talking at what moment. But this is something that we can deal with and just understand. And I think this is the key message, that if you think about financial well-being, you need to stop focusing on the financial part, but focus on the well-being part, and the finances come later. Because everything will anyhow be connected to the financial part of life. And another thing, because we had a wide range of different people in the data set, or the people that we talked to, or Kantar talked to, is financial well-being is a temporal concept. Sorry for a complicated word. Basically, it changes during your life. There is no one state of, oh my God, I have an ideal financial well-being, I want to hold on to it. No, it changes based on your value system, based on your dreams, based on the things, how and where you are in your life. It constantly grows, but it doesn't have like a point. It's just what's happening in your life is that whatever stage you are, the balance is a little bit different. in the beginning, maybe we are more pleasure-seeking, even though I think also, well, age comes to play. We should seek pleasure more, also during advanced years. But sometimes we have moments in our life where we actually have to focus on security. And this is something that triggers us for a couple of years, for some other period. Sometimes we are looking for freedom. Everybody knows, midlife crisis, the best place to focus on freedom, because now it's like, I've done something, but I want to change something. So again, the balance of all of these three elements will be a little bit different. And so on and so forth. There are lots of life stages and messages and points in your life in the either long run, in a short run, that influences your understanding. So it changes, but what remains is the triad. The triad is still there. Just the elements and the balances of the things are different. Oh my God, I was on time. But basically, what I wanted to say, when we put people actually into the center of understanding what financial well-being is, we found the heart of the thing. It is not just security and freedom, but also the pleasure of savoring life's everyday moments, enjoying this moment that we have. Because remember, we're still in this, I don't know how long we are going to stay this thing. We only have one life, even if we have afterlives in different situations. But we still have one life that we are living now. So maybe let's take it, enjoy it, and figure out how the security, freedom, and pleasure plays a good role in actually understanding where we are going and what we want to do.
Thank you. As you can see, we are pretty passionate about what we have done. I hope you will catch this contagion. The help from English speaker needed at the moment. So Pello was giving an overview of the first really important phase, which is understanding what financial well-being actually means for humans. And I will talk about the second phase, which is about assessing. It doesn't mean that we would have done these linearly, like 1, 2, 3, but we kept on going back and forth in the data through different stages, and it was a really iterative process. So I'm going to talk about how to measure financial well-being, what we did, what we developed, and also that it was mentioned that there was this very unique study in a bank in the Czech Republic, so I'm also going to give a very brief overview of that, although I could easily spend an hour or a few talking about that. So what was before I go into explaining what we did, maybe also give a little bit of the background. So I had been conducting financial well-being research for a few years before this passionate Alpbach meeting happened. And what I had seen is that the vast majority of the existing financial well-being measures are developed in English-speaking countries and also tested there. So mostly US, also UK and Australia. I'm not saying that these are bad measures or bad countries, but I'm saying that maybe they are not perfect for assessing financial well-being everywhere. Maybe they are context dependent. Actually, I even know that they're context dependent. I have some papers on that. So we did something different. As Boris was saying, we went to different countries and there were even more than 7 languages used in this process. What previous studies tend to do is to assess financial well-being as a single score, so a one number, so a diagnosis. But what does it tell you? Like if I tell you that your score is 49 out of 100, okay, but what will I do with that? Or as a policymaker, if I learn that in a country it has risen from 48 to 49, what will I do with this information? So we argue against this unidimensional, just a number, and believe that it should be assessed as a multidimensional construct. Sorry, complicated word again. What also previous studies do is they assess financial well-being only once in time. But what if it was a exceptionally bad day when you asked me those questions. What if I just had to repay a loan, or it was the 2 days before payday when there is not so much money on the account, or maybe it was just a day when I had bad mood. So just using this once in a moment questionnaire, question even, or a bunch of scales can really be misleading if treated as this one-time unidimensional number. And as Pello was highlighting, we contribute to financial well-being research by highlighting that pleasure, the enjoyment of life, is actually important, and it should be measured and also addressed. This is something that has sort of been assumed as a common sense. For example, in the US, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a definition of financial well-being where it mentions the enjoyment of life, but they don't measure it somehow. They just assume that it happens thanks to the financial security and wise financial behaviors. So what we did is we developed a new measure. Pello was talking about the 3 dimensions: security, freedom, and pleasure, and we developed a scale. Of course, ideally it would have 100 questions, so it would map all the diversity of life and be really, really comprehensive, but then no one would really be able to include it in any survey. So our aim was to have as brief measure as possible. And we didn't develop it by looking into the ceiling or clouds or bottom of a wine glass, but actually we went through those 630 interviews and found from there the way that people talk about these elements, and then developed the statements based on that. And we didn't stop there. We had a lot of discussions in the team with different experts, and then we actually tested it in 4 rounds of studies. Again, words that I'm not allowed to use. We tested the reliability and validity of these. So basically, we wanted to see if they measure what we think they measure and if they do it well enough. And that was done in online panels, in English, in Czech language. Why Czech? Because we went on using them in this partnership with the Česká, spořitelna. And finally, we can say that we have succeeded in developing this financial well-being scale that has those 3 dimensions, 3 questions or 3 statements per each of them. And it is really good for assessing it. It also works well across time, across languages. It has also been used in Estonian, so 3 languages until now. Maybe more languages are being used and tested soon, and across also personality types. We're not going to go into the details here, but we write about it in the book, so when you have the coffee break later, then you can grab the book and see more there. But we saw that it is a really stable tool for assessing financial well-being and its 3 components. And really important to emphasize, especially for those academics watching us online maybe, that we really do not want this measure to be used so that you sum the statements or the scores into one number. We really, really emphasize that please treat them as 3 different elements and study them separately. And not just because we want to make your life complicated, but because actually what we see in our analysis is that the paths to those 3 elements actually differ. So there are different things that matter for security, for freedom and pleasure, and if you just sum them into one, then you lose really important information. So take a second, read the statements, think how would you respond? See the security, freedom, pleasure? But if you want to take more than a second, if you want to take 10 minutes or maybe even 20, then there is a tool that we have also developed here is Kevin from Dux, who is behind this. I'm glad that he's still talking to me because it was quite a challenge. We wanted to do something completely different. We reviewed the existing financial well-being assessment tools. There are a lot of them, financial health or financial well-being tools. Usually they give you a score, or they tell you that you're in the red or you're in the green, and we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to give you a diagnosis. We didn't want to make you stressed because you got in the red answer, and we didn't want to leave you with this stress. We also wanted to have this tool already some support in it so that you would actually be able to take something forward in your life if you feel that you want something to be changed. So we went to Dux and we explained what we want, and then the biggest challenge was how to do it so that on one hand it would allow the user to think about very different topics that it's part of human life. So not just finances, but things like your work-life balance, your education, your family, your pets, my favorite topic, of course, and how these matter for all those elements of financial well-being. But at the same time, while asking people to think a lot about different parts of their life, it still be user-friendly. It still be something that a person is able to use and complete without falling asleep or giving up or getting super depressed. So that was the challenge that Kevin helped us to solve with some discussions in the process. But I hope that actually this provides a useful mirror for the user to reflect on various aspects of life and see if they want something to improve, because actually what we saw from the interviews was that there are quite a lot of people who are happy with the way they live. So especially in the financial sector, but also when talking to economics or finance professors, then it appears that the assumption is everyone wants to have their financial well-being improved. But that is not so. We see from our interviews that not everyone wants to be nudged or pushed or educated or offered something or advised on how to improve financial well-being. You shouldn't interfere in people's lives if they don't want it to be changed. However, we believe that using this tool gives this moment of reflection when you can think about these different aspects and perhaps see that maybe there is something that you want to do differently, to stop doing something, to do more of something, to do differently something. And then also you can there set goals for yourself. So you can say that, okay, I see that in security I could dedicate a bit more attention to this part of my life, and then you can set it as a goal and you can send it to yourself and also see how you did in the future. And we do give some tips and advice in the end if you decide that something needs to be improved or changed, but we don't go into saying that you're in the red or the score is this number out of a much bigger good number. And of course the process was long and winding before we went online, and it's currently there only in English, but I really hope that someone will find it very inspirational and wants to adapt it into their services, their measures, translate also to other languages. So what was so far was that there was this nice belief that if we teach them what is correct in the financial world, then they will change their behavior to make the right decisions, and emphasis on the word right, as if there was someone who knows what is the right for everyone, that there is a universal recipe that makes everyone happier ever after, and then that automatically somehow leads to financial well-being. And this chain was actually never tested until there was a paper published in the beginning of this year that actually for the first time really tested it. But actually Boris and I talked about it in Alpahdos years ago, that this is a nice assumption, but there is no evidence, and this is why we started. So when I saw this paper earlier this year, I was super proud that we are 3 years ahead of this discussion. So this was actually what led to this unique study in Česká, spořitelna. We wanted to see how the subjective assessment of security, freedom, and pleasure is linked to objective financial behavior and the actual financial situation. And actually, although you said that no longitudinal stuff, we did longitudinal stuff. So actually, there were people who responded to the questionnaire twice with a 6-month period in between. So actually we could see how the assessment changes over time and also study what affects or what explains those changes. And what we see, not a surprise, security is important. So security that has been measured and addressed previously is definitely important. It is good if you have a financial buffer. It is good if you don't have to be super stressed how you will cope with your costs tomorrow or 2 days after. What we also see, not only in Česká, but also in other studies, also the one conducted in Estonia about the personality and others, we see that actually the biggest shortcomings or the lowest average response is in freedom. So there are more people who neither agree nor disagree with statements about freedom, like being able to change course in life without worrying about money, then there are these lower scores in security and pleasure. And also, those who have pretty decent security can have good or better freedom and pleasure as well, but the relationship between freedom and pleasure is much more complicated. So this is where the human diversity comes to play, what Pello was also mentioning. So the different lifestyles, life stages, preferences, values, all that, the human lives are that come to picture when we move towards freedom and pleasure. What was a shock for me, well, although it shouldn't be, because, well, I've done financial literacy research previously for many years and seen that there is a gender gap in financial literacy, and it is discussed whether women have lower scores in financial literacy because they're less confident in their knowledge, they are less likely to just guess their answer. Is it discrimination or what it is? Then what still was shocking for me was when we could do this really in-depth analysis in data from Česká, spořitelna, we saw that when women and men hold the same amount of assets or the same amount of liabilities, at least in that bank, we don't know what they do outside that bank, but we can make some assumptions, then systematically women rate all 3 elements of financial well-being to be lower than men. So men and women with the same amount of assets or liabilities, gender gap in the assessment. So it can be the things that I said, women less confident or males overconfident, I don't know. It can be discrimination, gender pay gap, it can be the different meaning of money that women and men have, that has been studied also by a good friend of ours. And I think this definitely calls for further research. What we see is that assets are really vital, but the relationship with liability is more complicated. The role of debt is more complex than with assets. Assets is pretty clear. If you have more savings, more investments, your financial well-being assessment is higher. And again, with debt, like those more in debt don't generally have a very high financial well-being. What was a surprise for me, I know this is a very complicated picture, don't even try to understand it or read it, but what is on the picture I can explain. So these are transactions across the three financial well-being elements, and we were thinking that the way that you spend money might differ across levels of financial well-being, and what we actually see that yes, on the extremes they do differ, but in the middle the picture is much more complicated, and actually the spending patterns are rather similar. So it doesn't mean that it would go like a straight line from the necessities to maybe a more luxurious consumption. And what is a big problem for us is this big blue area here. This is the area that we couldn't explain. This is the spending that is not linked to this code that we could use for actually categorizing the spending, and this is the black box or the blue box of our research. And what we also see is the thing that I already mentioned, that actually the paths to those three elements partly differ. There are things that affect all three, like the self-assessed change in financial situation, gender that I already explained, age. Also, interestingly, those who had savings outside this bank had a higher financial well-being. Maybe it means they have more and they have diversified more, perhaps. But then the paths started to differ. So for security, the positive effect was from using financial planners. So those who are planning using tools for that are doing better in security. And also spending on furniture, household stuff has a good effect. So if you have a nice home, nice furniture there, then you rate your security to be higher. But negative relationship with spending on food and drink and in gas stations. And the gas stations, again, are a little bit of a blue box for us because we don't know if they bought the coffee, chocolate, or petrol. Like, we don't know what it is. For freedom, income matters. So higher household income, more freedom, not a surprise. Spending on donations and also the amount of money you have on your account explains freedom. Negative effect, if you spend too much on clothing, footwear, and transport, then there is a negative correlation. And for pleasure, if you can go out to a restaurant, to take your friends to a concert, then you rate it to be higher. So I know I'm over time, but I'm still going to nicely finish this bit. I warned you that we did a lot, so it's hard to do it briefly. So we also assessed the changes over time, and actually, to our surprise, there were not so many huge changes. It might be because those who responded for the second time were doing pretty well also in the first round. So maybe only the optimistic people answered, but they didn't report much of change. And why it surprised us was that we thought that as the first round of data collection was at the time or close to the time of very high inflation, that maybe the assessment was influenced by the high inflation, but it wasn't. At least we didn't see this in this sample. And what is important, what comes to the title of this book, is that when we looked at the things that explain the three parts of financial well-being, then we could include background data, age, gender, things like these, and then the financial data. And all that together, a lot of different variables, explain just a quarter of financial well-being. And here, when we studied the changes over time, then a third can be explained by this. So meaning that a lot goes beyond everything financial and directly money-related. And what is also important, in my opinion, to understand, in addition to the importance of treating it as a three-dimensional beast, creature, bliss, I don't know, that the changes are not always up to date. So we saw that those who are close to repaying their mortgage already rate their financial well-being to be higher, as if it was already repaid. Well, close, but not yet. And also it can lag in time, so it can be that the financial situation has objectively already worsened. We can see that from the bank data, but the assessment is still positive. They have not yet updated this financial well-being assessment. And I will stop now and give the floor to Adele to say, like, okay, but what do you do with our findings?
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for coming. I see a lot of people in the room and I don't recognize all the faces. So I don't really know who I'm going to be talking to and how you might want to influence people in their financial well-being. So it's a little bit of a mystery for me, and I apologize in advance if I don't exactly address your questions, but we will have time for that later. When we had all of this information in our minds about how people see financial well-being in such a unique way, we knew straight away that the answer wasn't going to be, let's talk to financial service providers and get them to find the solution. The answer has to be, let's talk to anyone who has contact with other humans who might be able to make a difference. And that's really what I'm going to try to stress in the next few minutes. Leonore took a couple of my minutes, so I might take a couple of someone else's. So, we've heard already how there's this assumption that if we're looking at financial well-being rather than well-being in the general, then we need financial interventions. We hear about how financial education, financial counselling, transparent and personalised provision of financial services, or financial inclusion as it's sometimes known, are going to be important. And I'm not here to burst the bubble of anyone who works in that. I do a lot of work myself in those areas. They have a role. But the point is that we shouldn't blame them if nothing's happening, because they're not doing it by themselves. And equally, we shouldn't look to them. Why am I clicking? My hair, I guess. We shouldn't look to them to have all the solutions, because actually the solutions are going to come from a much broader set of stakeholders. So don't feel too sad if I'm saying financial education isn't the only thing. I'm not saying financial education is no longer necessary. I'm really sorry about the clicking. I can't move much less. I'll try without glasses. Does that help? So instead of making this assumption that we needed a financial intervention, we looked through our interviews. We looked at how people talk about their preferences, how they talk about their aspirations, and the life events that they discussed when they explained how their financial well-being looked. We then went into the evidence to see... I think someone's coming my way. Okay. Excuse me while I start to take off my jewellery. Okay, please somebody remind me to take my hearing home. Did that help? Do I sound less clicky? Excellent. Then I might be able to move around, which is also quite nice. So yes, so once we had this much broader perspective, we were able to look into a wider range of research, of policy documents, of discussions that changed elements of financial well-being without necessarily relying on financial interventions. And we also tested some novel interventions ourselves. We like research, so that was a great part. And I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. So we set up 3 experiments. 2 of them had a kind of similar model, so they both relied on apps, but in very different domains. So one of them was a very standard financial app in the sense that it was helping people to make financial plans, whilst the other one was looking at mental health. So 2 different approaches. In both cases, people were randomized, so they didn't get to choose where they went. Some of them used the app, and some of them watched some videos for the same amount of time. And what we saw was that the app that was developed to help people with their mental health improved their financial security, freedom, and pleasure. But interestingly, so did participants listening to the TED Talk for the same amount of time. So there's something interesting going on, but there's more to be done to try to understand what's going on. The financial planning app also changed security, which you would hope that's really its basic reason for existing. But it changed freedom as well. And similarly, again, in the people that were sent to watch TED Talks instead of using the app, we saw improvements in their financial well-being across these measures. We had another experiment, which was shorter, much shorter. So whereas the people used the app for the free period of 10 days and were followed up a month later, the other experiment was just a couple of minutes, and it was just asking them to either go through a long list of budget items and work out which ones they actually had and roughly how much money, but they didn't even write the money down. They just said, I know exactly, or I know to some extent. And the others had to think about their own financial story. They had to think about how they were doing compared to their goals and what their biggest success was. And we didn't see any difference in financial well-being a week later, on average. But then once we started to look into the data, what we discovered was that people who had been coping with the cost of living had some benefit from looking back over their own financial life and thinking about their financial story. And interestingly, that benefit was highest for people in minoritized ethnic groups. So there was something quite specific going on that meant by thinking about how well they were doing, they recognized that their financial well-being across these measures was a little bit higher than they thought. So as Leonore mentioned, there was perhaps a lag in the update, and by us encouraging them to tell their story, they updated their own idea of what their financial well-being was and how it felt. What we also, and I've tried to say this a little bit already, want to really stress is that financial well-being is something that's relevant to all humans, and it's also relevant to everybody. It's your business as much as it's our business, as much as it's people in Erste's business. You don't have to work in the financial services sector, but you also don't have to be trying to make people wealthier. There's no harm in making people wealthier, and some people will appreciate it, although, as we said, a lot of people actually, that's not what they're looking for in life. You definitely don't have to teach them to budget. We didn't see any benefit in our little experiment from reminding people to think about their budget. And you don't have to tell people to be rational. And we know that that's still a challenge that we see, especially if we've had a classical economics training, that we have these rational assumptions. Blow them out. It doesn't matter. They just aren't the most important thing. We can change financial well-being without making the rational people around us. We can change financial well-being if we're educators. And that might include financial education. And if we're employers, and we might start to think about whether or not we can improve people's freedom or pleasure, not just their security. If we're careers advisors, or if we work in a school that doesn't provide careers advice, we can think about how we might help people to think about their freedom. And if we're adults, we can think about whether we can search for careers advice, because we know that freedom might mean a change. And if anybody is sat next to their boss at this point, just don't look at them right now. We also know that financial service providers, regulators, and policymakers can have a lot of positive influences on the way that financial well-being works, especially if they work together, especially if regulation and financial service providers understand that some people are in vulnerable situations. And in a way, this goes back to what Pello mentioned, that for some people, financial well-being doesn't make any sense at the moment because they're in survival mode. Vulnerability is a regulatory issue, it's a provider issue, it's also an issue for other services. So when people are in vulnerable situations that have an impact on their financial well-being, they might speak to health workers. They may have a care provider. They may be using therapists. So you can see how there are roles there also for thinking about the freedom, the pleasure, the lack thereof for those people, and how there may be opportunities to think about their financial well-being as well as their health, as well as their other needs. We also know that there's an enormous and unfortunately growing role for people who are fighting crime. Whether you work in the police force or whether you work in fraud prevention, your role is incredibly important. The number of people that are facing scams, and it's very easy to say it's a certain cohort. Often we say it's older generations, but this is increasingly not the case. And so we know that there's research that is ongoing into how we remind people to be careful about scams. There is evidence to suggest that reminders do work, but you have to keep using them, and so you have to keep innovating. But on top of that, if you are working in that area, you're going to have an important role to play in people's financial well-being. We also, as humans, as people in a community, as friends, as family, once we start to understand that financial well-being means more than just security, we can think about that. So if you give your friend a ticket to do something for their birthday, maybe give them 2 so they can take someone else, because then their financial well-being might be improved in a different way, because instead of them having 1 ticket, they've already got the possibility to be more sociable. Simple things. Okay, so some of those people on that previous slide might be providing financial education. So there's some really important questions, and one of the questions we still can't answer despite all this research is how much financial literacy is needed to be financially well-beinged. You can't do that, can you? I ran out of sentence there. How can we change financial well-being through financial literacy? So what do we know? Because never mind that there are things we don't know. What we do know is that when people assess financial well-being and assess financial knowledge especially, they often don't see much of a relationship. But once they start to look at how people assess their own knowledge, they see a relationship. That suggests to us that confidence is going to be key. So there's no point working in the financial education domain without also thinking about confidence. That seems to be a really important message. We also know that the lovely diagram that Leonore shared, that knowledge doesn't necessarily change behavior. We all know when we shouldn't take another cake. We don't always stop taking cake. That's going to be a continued story. This is not news. But we do know from a lot of research that there is a role to try to change behavior directly. Depending on the terminology you use, that's still financial education or financial literacy. However you look at it, be mindful that that might have some role. And we also know that it's easier to change saving behavior than it is borrowing behavior. So again, if you are looking at working on financial security, keep that in mind. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to change borrowing behavior, but you have to recognize that changing borrowing behavior probably is going to take a lot of time, whereas you could initiate a savings behavior immediately. Borrowing, you're often in a long-term contract. You can't necessarily do something overnight. You have to make some plans and move forward. So timing is sometimes also important. Some people will be focusing on the financial security area, and if that is something that you focus on, then, as I mentioned, lifelong or repeated careers guidance might be something to think about putting in that. So if you work in financial planning, for example, possibly think about that, because then you move from just thinking about security to thinking about freedom as well. When you're thinking about security, often you might be thinking about investments or wealth management, but actually we know that you can help people by giving them secure, reliable incomes. And that might mean having greater accessibility in the workplace. And I'm sure it won't come as a surprise that there's research that suggests that can help people with disabilities to stay in the workplace. if people can't access work and they do need benefits, sometimes they're reluctant to do that. If you want to build financial security across all kinds of populations and not just those trying to build their wealth, then really signposting people to support can make a big difference. And in the UK, we've got this term at the moment, the warm, I don't think we say warm signposting, but this is a way of actually handing someone over to the provider that can help them. So again, trying to think about security in a different way. And then there's lots of research on automated savings and goal setting. We know that, for example, helping people to set a goal for their saving is better than just incentivizing them by saying that we'll match your savings with some other saving, because it gives them a purpose. We know that there's research and even experiments that show the benefit of coaching, of planning, of debt advice. We also know, but I don't believe there's a lot of evidence on this, that it can be beneficial to go into communities and try to find out if there are illegal lenders that are preying on people's financial security by getting them to take loans in a way that is completely unregulated and often very dangerous. And I mentioned the scams, so I'll stop on that one. But what about freedom and pleasure? It was harder for us to find information on this because people aren't writing about financial well-being in terms of freedom and pleasure because they didn't know it was a thing. We created it. So you can't just go into a literature database and draw out those relevant things. Which is one of the reasons we did our own experiments, and we did see changes in freedom from our experiments and some improvements in pleasure. But you have to think more broadly then, and certainly research that I've done in the UK and that other people have talked about increasingly recognizes that on the one hand, sometimes freedom requires a certain amount of access to credit, and on the other hand, it might require flexibility, not necessarily in terms of repaying credit. It could be utilities, it could be other bills that people have. But we live in a world where not everybody gets paid the same amount every month. That might be because they're doing gig work, it might be because they're self-employed, it might be because they're seasonal workers, it could be because they have caring responsibilities. But whatever it is, flexibility isn't or shouldn't be asking for special treatment. We live in a world where things move in microseconds, and yet we still insist that people pay on the same day every month, regardless of when they get their money. So there are things we can do to build in freedom that probably don't cost very much and that can make a massive difference to some people's lives. And then turning in a different direction, we found quite an old article that was looking at social tourism, at providing the opportunity to get out of your home domain and do something different in a way that benefited the community that was receiving the tourists as well as benefiting the tourists. Nothing seemed to have been done since this study was published, but it suggests again that maybe we need to start opening these conversations again and asking, what can we do? What could we do together or as individuals to help people to enjoy their lives, to make them the most of every day? That would be a really big change. We also know, and Pello started with this information, that whilst we are describing financial well-being in terms of the triad, that a lot of people had this shortcut way of talking about it. It's about peace of mind. And this is why we tested the mindfulness app, why we've looked at financial well-being from different directions, and why I mentioned some types of health provision. Because actually, you can start to see how people's mental health can also be linked to how they're experiencing their financial well-being. So going back to this regulation for vulnerable consumers, that would help with peace of mind. If people knew they could trust that their provider had a system in place, that would mean they didn't have to repeat themselves, that they were in a vulnerable situation, that they would already have a marker on their file and they would be sent to a different service. That could be incredibly helpful. Similarly, we can work with people who have gambling problems. There's research that shows that if you don't allow people to pay by credit card, it can help those people who are not serious gamblers. However, those that are serious will still find other ways of borrowing money. But if you can help some people to not get into gambling debt, that's beneficial. We know as well, again, from the apps that we tested and from other research, that there are ways of helping people to fight the guilt and shame, the stigma of being in problem debt. That impacts on financial well-being in all kinds of ways, so fighting that is very valuable. I've got 10 seconds to tell you what you can do for yourself. I'm going to pot what's on that slide and say, I don't think I actually need to do that, because you've heard so many times that you need to think about not just security. Think about freedom, think about pleasure. And I don't think you'll be able to not think about those things, because once they're in your mind, they're in your mind. And we've said this endlessly. We've sat down and had so many meetings where we've just said, okay, yeah, actually this is about my freedom and it's important and it's not a compromise. We'd like to know if you do make any changes. We'd really, really appreciate hearing what you do. I'm allowed one more slide because I'm going to actually stop talking about influencing now. And I'd just like to say what I think we've achieved over the last 3 years. So I'm going to sort of give you the sum of the parts, if you like. We all have our own interpretation because we all started from different places. We all have our own emotional attachment to different parts of this project. So these are my thoughts. What we have done is we've undertaken research that I think has really disrupted a lot of group thinking. I have sat in meetings over and over and over again where we've had the same conversation, and it's time we stopped having that particular conversation and had new ones. And since starting this project, we've had new conversations. We've found subtleties in our understanding of how people think about financial well-being, and therefore we've seen new possibilities. We've created something that's multidimensional, and that's much more human. We really don't tend to think in linear patterns, so this just feels more real. And it's time we were more real. We don't need to strip everything back. Sometimes we just have to put it all in the basket and run with it. We found better ways of measuring financial well-being than there are in the academic literature. And that's really helping us now because we have a tool that we can use to explore people's banking data, to go off and look at health records and see if we can make differences there. Who knows in the future? That is not a project, but if you'd like to fund it, it could be. We have deepened our understanding of how financial well-being varies by different factors. And we will continue to look into that because it's super fascinating. We've made it possible for people to assess their own financial well-being without just filling in a questionnaire, but with thinking about the things that are influencing their financial well-being. And we've started to identify ways to make the improvements that people actually want, the changes that they'd like to see, not just to change what they see as this top point of some magical wealth measure, but to change how they understand, experience, and appreciate their lives. And I think that's really key.
As you can see, we really are passionate about our work. We are finding serious problems with staying in the short overviews, but bear with me. Thank you for still being awake. And if you feel totally overwhelmed, don't worry. In a minute, you can ask questions, and then during the coffee break, you can read more from the book. But just to conclude and say what happens next, because we really believe that this is the start of a new phase, not the end, and the book published, and have a nice drink and never meet again. So what we believe that would be a very wise next step, and we have been already talking with ERSTE Foundation and also Erste Group a little bit about that, is that if there was a longitudinal financial well-being study conducted across Europe, so asking the same people over a certain time period questions that would actually help to understand the different dimensions of financial well-being, security, freedom and pleasure, and understand also some other aspects that influence those or explain those, so that we would be able to understand what is correlating with those parts, what is causing changes, and to compare. I wouldn't go into an index, a single number. As I said, I'm not a fan of a single number, but to have several indicators, 5 to 10 indicators that we can compare within and across countries. So again, if someone wants to fund, we are happy to talk to you. And the last bit is that although we tried to summarize the key findings in the book, our aim was not to write academic book, but there are a lot of academic papers coming out of this project. So actually in June in Tartu, the time when the nights don't get dark and it's super romantic, there will be a conference organized by Roberta, who is here also luckily, so you can ask questions during the break. And luckily ERSTE Foundation is supporting the financial well-being session there, and there we will already present the 6 manuscripts that are a work in progress. So academics, policymakers, bankers, you're all very, very welcome to attend and to learn more. There will be 6 parallel tracks, 4 keynote speakers, fabulous. Cool parties too. Thank you.
Whose glasses are these? Okay. Okay, and the earring, yeah. Even more important, so because we don't know if this is security or pleasure, but yeah, thank you. Many thanks to all of you for this incredibly insightful, interesting insights. Yeah, as we didn't show this Q&R code before, we do not have questions on Slido, but we do have microphones in the room, so we can do a short Q&A now. Are there any questions in the room? Don't be shy. Yes, the gentleman in the back. Please tell us your name, your role, and to whom on the panel you direct your question to.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Roland, Director of Vienna Design Week. Thanks for the super fascinating insights. I wonder, one of the aspects, a kind of bit of an elephant in the room, what about the political aspect? How does that impact those 3 factors that you've identified? Or is that too much for a first look into financial well-being?
Well, I can start, and then you can help me here. So first, I think what is important to highlight one more time is that we didn't see country differences in understanding financial well-being. We see human diversity, but no country differences in that. But it is not to say that the context doesn't matter. Of course it matters, the contextual factors, what is on the news in that country. So for example, when we collected the data where those 630 interviews were conducted, then we had very nice helpers in all of the Erste Group banks in the region. So actually the bankers told us, gave us answers in a questionnaire about what was happening in the country at the time that the interviews were conducted. So what was on the news, what people were talking about on social media, what were the key concerns and so on, so that we would be able to interpret our findings. So if we had seen that there is something very strange in a country, then we could quickly go back to the data that we had from the banks in the region and see, like, okay, this might be explained by that. But we didn't see those differences there. But of course, I think it also may differ across the 3 elements. So maybe for security, especially when we think about the longer term, the pension system might matter, like what is the system in the country and how secure it is. Also, we saw when we looked at association to certain financial terms across countries, then we saw that in some countries, in Hungary, for example, people didn't mention stocks or any financial assets, but talked about tangible things that you can move to another country with, for example, when talking about assets or wealth. So there were things like these that came to the picture, but I wouldn't say that we had much of this political issues there, but maybe Adele, you can add or argue.
No, I think I would absolutely agree with you. I didn't see anything in the data that suggested that the political situation was affecting the way they answered. Obviously, it can affect the mood, and it can affect their opportunities. It can affect the way stakeholders are funded. It can affect the attention that we can afford people. So there are lots of ways in which it will affect our ability, your ability to help people with their financial well-being.
Are there further questions? Please, the gentleman on the right side. Can you hand the microphone over, please?
It's like a game.
Get this ball.
Pro.
Yeah, thank you very much. Peter from the Vienna University of Economics and Business. And I would be interested, actually, maybe you had a chance to look at it, at the relationship between financial well-being and sound decision-making. Does more financial well-being lead to the peace of mind that is required for sound decisions, or does it maybe lead to complacency and risky decision-making once you are too well off?
Did we see anyone too well off?
A couple of people.
Well,
yacht owner.
The yacht owner. But it's really nice. Thank you for the question. It's really nice that you go in this direction, not that the behavior leads to financial well-being, but the other way around. Just like we saw with mental health, that until now it has been assumed that if you have good financial well-being, then it's good for your mental health. But we showed also the direction, the relationship in the opposite direction. But one thing I dare to take from your question and nag a little bit is the sound decision-making, like the normative part, like what is a good way of making decisions. So we really tried to stay away of saying what is a good or bad or weird decision. But we didn't really have time for experimenting as much as I had dreamed of, because guess what? We ran out of time. So the process has been long and winding. But definitely we would call for studies that test this relationship in both directions. Actually, we have a huge list of hypotheses that we would dream of being tested. How many was there?
86 full ones,
yes.
And some extra
so
here and there.
If there is anyone here in the room or online, please contact us. We would be happy to be able to answer your question in full.
I think if I could just add to that, what we definitely saw from the qualitative research was that some people had kind of moderate levels of financial well-being, and it made them scared of doing things in case they made things worse. They could see that they might be able to improve things, but they could also see that an improvement would come with a cost. That might be, for example, if all their money was helping them to feel secure, but they weren't spending it on pleasure, then they knew that changing that meant that their security would feel like it was falling. And that fear was preventing some people from doing things that might actually feel nice. So that was a really interesting and strong message from some people. You know, we had diversity, but definitely something that we reflected on and have written in previous reports.
Any further questions? Yes, a lot of questions. We can't take all of them. The lady, I guess, in the last row, please. I can't see you clearly. It's too dark.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Antigona from the NGO Academy. Thank you for the presentation, it was really great. I was just reflecting on the universal basic income and whether your research actually has a connection with the universal basic income, and if not, would that be a follow-up of that to connect your findings with the findings of experiments of the UBI? Thank you.
The simple answer is no, we didn't link directly to that. The more complicated answer is that when you see the people in survival mode, it really makes you question whether we should be looking at that again as one of the ways of helping people to experience financial well-being, because definitely income has an important role to play. Income volatility is detrimental for a lot of people. And I say that from a lot of research that I've done, not only from the research we're talking about today. So there's a lot to be done in that space, but it wasn't the focus of this research.
But wasn't it in our hypothesis? We
definitely
there is a hypothesis that it should be helping improvement and stability of financial well-being, but it's just an hypothesis at the moment.
So
again,
plenty of space for further research.
Yes. So that's what science is about, testing hypotheses. So thank you very much. Don't believe the countdown. We are way ahead of time. So thank you very much. Please give another warm round of applause to our core research team. And I don't believe that Pello is getting 50 any day soon, as he told us. So after the coffee break, we will continue right here at 5 o'clock. So it's a very short coffee break, but the researchers spent all their minutes before the coffee break. I'm sorry. So, good.
Dankeschön. Of quiet stars, quiet chords from my guitar, floating on the silence that surrounds us. Quiet thoughts and quiet dreams, quiet walks by quiet streams, and the window looking on the mountain and the sea. How lovely, this is where I want to be. Here with you so close to me until the final flicker of life's ember. I who was lost and lonely, believing life was only a bitter tragic joke I'd found with you. The meaning of existence, so my love, quiet nights of quiet stars, quiet chords from my guitar, floating on the silence that surrounds us. Quiet thoughts and quiet dreams, quiet walks by quiet streams, and the window looking on the mountain and to see how lovely, this is where I want to be. Here with you so close to me until the final flicker of life's ember. I who was lost and lonely, believing life was only a bitter tragic joke I found with you. The meaning of existence, oh my love. from my guitar, floating on the silence that surrounds us. Quiet thoughts and quiet dreams, quiet walks by quiet streams, and a window looking on the mountain and the sea. How lovely, this is where I want to be, here with you so close to me, until the final flicker of life's ember. I who was lost and lonely, believing life was only a bitter tragic joke I'd found with you. The meaning of existence, oh my love. My story is much too sad to be told, but it practically leaves me totally cold. The only exception I know is the case when I'm out on a quiet speed, fighting vainly the older weed, and suddenly I turn and see your fabulous face. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3. I get no kick from champagne, but alcohol, it doesn't thrill me at all. Tell me, why should it be true? Yes, that I get a kick out of you. Sound like the perfume from Spain. I'm sure that if I took even one sniff, it would bore me terrifically too. Oh well, I do get a kick out of you. I get a kick every time I see you standing there before me. I get a kick, though it's clear to see that you obviously you do not adore me. I get no kick in a plane, flying too high with some chick in the sky. It's my ideal of nothing to do. Oh, well, I do get a kick out of you.
Okay, so good. Quick change of plans. Dann machen wir so. So, not so easy to sit here. Welcome back. We have heard powerful insights. Now we ask what can be done. How can banks, policymakers, regulators, civil society, how can all of us contribute to improving people's financial well-being? I'm delighted to welcome Adele Atkinson back on stage. And let me also introduce two new voices to join us. Monika Huber, Chief Financial Health and CX Officer at Česká, spořitelna, where she leads customer experience for over 4 million clients. And Petja Niederländer, Director of Payment Risk Management and Financial Literacy at the Austrian National Bank and a key figure in Austria's national financial literacy strategy. So, give a warm round of applause to our three panelists. And now again, it's the time for you to ask questions or make comments. On the live stream, you see the QR code here in the auditorium. You can ask questions again later on via microphone in person. Petja, I would like to start with you. What surprised you the most in the study or challenged your assumptions? You are responsible for financial literacy at the Austrian National Bank. So based on the findings, how will this influence your approach?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, also to Erste Foundation and the opportunity to discuss that so important topic. Financial well-being is generally very much getting an importance between scholars, but also regulators and market participants generally. And we see that in the recent paper of the OECD. Why is that so? In 2021, we have 76% of the population, age 15 plus, who already have bank account or mobile wallet. And this is much bigger as the 50% a decade ago. So financial well-being is very important because it helps us to measure how good are our policies when we are talking about financial inclusion and implement interventions for financial inclusion. And that's a lot about numbers. As Leonore showed us, we have these all questionnaires and rigorous evaluations and numbers and scorecards. But what surprised me, to come back to the question, was beyond rigorous assessment, which is very much important, don't get me wrong, there is also the human lens or the perspective of the individual questioning of how you feel, individual perspective here, and the topic that you engage with the target group in a very unique way. You let the target group also engage with you on the self-assessment. And for me, the continuation will be also to challenge and assess the understandability and comparability of questions, how people understand them in different countries, and how that impacts the outcome as such.
Mm-hmm. One of the most surprising findings of this study is how the term wealth is understood across all age groups. Almost universally, it's associated with owning property, especially a home. We heard that before, and very few mentioned financial assets like stocks or pension funds. What does this tell us about the disconnect between how people define wealth and how banks talk about it, or have been talking about it? Even the word investment itself seems to be emotionally distant or even off-putting for many. What does that mean for financial communication?
I think it's like in current world, where the finances are very much abstract. It seems that for people, it's still something what needs to be represented by tangible symbols. So that's one aspect of that. And I think like it's some coming back to the things we are developing as banks, thinking about this ultimate need of people, to understand the size, understand the reason behind that, understand the exact plan or people's beliefs. So I feel like this housing principle, seeing something tangible behind the assets, is the ultimate people's goal. And one of the things I was really, I was happy about this research because in a way there is also a taboo speaking about the finances. So like people don't talk like how much they earn, how much they have on the account, but they like to show off like what they achieved. And houses or cars were often the symbols of the success or like reaching something. It doesn't have to be big house, but it has to be house or it's this perfect garden. So I feel like we have to understand that for some people this is the way how they speak about the finances, how they speak about reaching the goal, and that they would like to speak about that, but in the in the assets they have currently in the hands, in their mobile. This is hard, right? So we have to deal with this taboo stuff, but at the other side also the need to share the nice stuff, nice achievement, and maybe give people tools how they can represent or communicate the things they achieved. So I really like this house, the symbol. I have a colleague which is a really great economist in a bank, and he said for my parents, when they asked me whether I'm successful or not, the main thing they were looking for was owning a house or property. So that's how the world exists, and I think like we have to think about it for our products and just be more tangible as the banks in producing those artifacts for our clients.
So do we need to stop aiming for one financial language and start building many?
I think we have to rethink our language, because this is not maybe the only language, and it's missing this human part. So we are using some financial language which is maybe not fully fitting the people's language that they use. And there is a part which maybe as a banks we didn't explore, and it's very important for people.
Gender is one of the most underexplored dimensions of financial well-being. As Leonore has already touched upon, the study shows that even women who have the same income and assets as men tend to rate their financial well-being lower. What about this gap in financial well-being? What explains it, and how do we close it?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. There's a lot of women on the stage and there's a lot of women in the room, and we're probably not average, which is always important to remember that when we talk about averages between men and women, there's huge variety within men and a huge variety within women. And there's a lot of people that don't want to identify as either of those two genders. So this is not something, again, that we want to impose. But if we just unpick it a little bit and we say, okay, so women are assessing their financial security as lower than men's, even though they have the same assets. And there's a good reason for that. Women live longer than men. So if they have the same assets, they're not actually going to stretch for far enough. So the logic is sound. And what we should do about it has to be structural. That if we want women to retire on the same income for the whole of their lives, then we have to think about ways to do that. And we can do the same with the others. If we look at freedom, women tend not to be as free as men. They tend to take on more caring responsibilities. They tend to take more responsibility during the childhood years if they have children in the household. Again, I'm talking averages, but we're talking about average results. So it makes sense for women with the same level of assets to say they're not as free as the men would say, because they can't just change direction quite so quickly. They do have additional responsibilities. But what we also saw, and it's really important to remember the nuances, we saw in the data that men feel this huge amount of pressure to actually work more when children come, whereas women often feel the pressure to A, care and B, earn. And so the decision isn't always to work more, sometimes it's to work less. So men's freedom, when it does reduce as a result of caring, tends to reduce by putting their income up, so it puts them into a different category. So it's super nuanced and very, very difficult. When we looked at the way in which men and women talk about pleasure, Pello's already told you that pleasure can be as simple as just going out for a coffee with friends. Women more often talked about going to buy a treat for their children. So that's a nice little present, might be an ice cream out, might be going on a train somewhere, who knows. Men, when they talked about it, they quite often talked about taking their partner on a date. So their treat was perhaps a little bit more expensive. But somehow or other, again, there are differences, there are nuances. And we're talking about qualitative data, so we can't necessarily extrapolate, but what we can say is that there are differences and there seem to be some interesting patterns. So we have to explore further. But you asked me what we should do about it.
And really, how do we close the gap? That's the interesting question. How do we
close the gap? So we can't necessarily close all of those gaps because we can't necessarily encourage women and men to think differently about pleasure. But we can maybe make sure that we look at those things through a gender lens sometimes so that we consider them. And that's not giving people pink bank cards and blue bank cards. It's not how it works.
Oh.
But there are ways we can do it better. So I think we should do that. And we do have to look at the policy behind things like retirement savings, like the way in which money is split after a divorce, like access to children. I'm sure there are plenty of men in this room that have experienced the unequal access to children after divorce. There are lots of issues that are not yet resolved at a structural level that have huge implications on well-being, on financial well-being, on mental health. So it's a serious topic and it's very hard to unpick, but there are places we can look.
Is pink bank cards, is that a real thing? I've never seen one. Anyone? No, hopefully not. The study shows something else uncomfortable. Many people are simply not interested into improving their financial well-being. They deal with money out of necessity, as Rauno told us, not out of curiosity or ambition. And yet the study also introduces a new dimension, pleasure. Financial well-being is not about just safety and control, it's also about enjoying life. So here's my question to you, Monica. If people don't want more advice, but more pleasure, how should financial institutions respond?
It's quite hard, right? We cannot do the pleasure in the branches. But generally, I think like it's more about how we talk about money. It's like in the past, and I am in the bank for a couple of years, and we are still dealing with the language, how we speak about the money. And I think it's more improving in this direction, right? Speaking about the money in the terms which people are using naturally. Also, like not using everything, every know-how we have, but maybe think about digestible pieces. And just looking at the formats which we are using at the moment, and we see the promising and really good stuff is that if we are really putting a small bits of information in a funny form, if we are rewarding people for a habit which is good, if we are sending out the information which is relevant for this particular person, female or male or young or old people, at the moment when when it's relevant, then it makes the sense. And I think like we like more and more it's more about like stepping into their life cycle and lifestyle and being present as a the tiny something behind when we can act as a advisor in the particular moment. And looking at the format which we used, for example, such a simple things which we are using, it's a pay and save. It's actually with every transaction you are saving something. So we don't have to explain people that saving is important, you have to save. But it's also about, like when you communicate the message, because like communicating the message about saving is much better if you send it out after their paydays, because they have the money on the account. So at you time it right, and people are like listening to that, and it's the right moment, then the saving pattern or habit can happen. So this is the right moment. But it's also that people don't have to think about that, and we don't have to bother them with the education information, but it can be automatized system which sets apart this money and sends them on saving account, and when you can add some feature which can accelerate the growth, and then suddenly the education previous about saving is perfect, save some money, do it now, do it via some product, is changed differently into the format which is much more tied to the people and to the purpose and to the result, and doesn't bother people and doesn't consume so much attention of the people. So we don't have to educate in the old-fashioned way, but we have to be present in people's life and actually give the tiny notice when it's relevant.
Mm-hmm. Studies show that in times of uncertainty, whether economic, social, or geopolitical, people develop a strong need for orientation and control. German researcher Pierre Lamberti has repeatedly emphasized that it is precisely during such phases that the longing for simple explanation grows. What does this mean for how we deal with financial decisions, Petja? How can we prevent people from turning to seemingly safe but ultimately harmful financial decisions, such as overpriced products, dubious promises, or populist messages via social media?
That's a very, very serious question. We have seen that also in our research that the behavior of people is quite different. And so when we talk about financial education or financial literacy, you have to emphasize the place where they come from. There is different payment patterns for men and women. There are different savings patterns for them. And also in times of uncertainty, they react differently. But what we see the most is that decisions which are highly emotional try to get to a neutral place where the advice or the ground which has to be reached has to be trusted by the population. And here, we believe that there are two measures which are mostly important. The one is to have interdisciplinary cooperation between different stakeholders, with the public sector providing for neutrality and for, so to say, this kind of a safe haven, safe ground, certainty that information is proof-checked and diligent, and private sector which cooperates in order to fulfill the needs who are here. Because in a moment of uncertainty, people get back to their networks, to their small towns, neighborhoods, families, or also to the small bubbles they visit in the social media, and try to get advice not directly from professionals, but from that bubbles. In order to reach them, you need to provide a message that's a multifold and commonly recognized message from all the participants on the market, and not particularly the voice and opinion from one of them. And the second measure, which I believe it's very much important, is the rigorous evaluation. Because sometimes we tend to create policy measures and invest a lot of money in projects which we not really know how they impact the final, how the intervention impact finally the financial education or the financial behavior of people. We have started in a certain interdisciplinary approach together with the Foundation for Financial Education, a project with different, with the ERSTE Foundation, with the Central Bank, but also with the Chamber of Commerce and other participants, very diverse a project. And we see there through the rigorous evaluation that the questions and the expectations we had that the pupils will learn from financial materials, how they develop, which makes more sense or less, we see that change over time. So even our own expectations need to be adjusted in order that we have a proper intervention. And without qualitative checks of this intervention, it doesn't work. So we believe that the combination of both collaboration, neutral ground, but also persistent and rigorous evaluated interventions is significant to reach the non-believers and create more trusted
It's very interesting.
knowledge.
You also emphasized trust. Monica, would you like to add your perspective on this? How do financial institutions maintain or regain trust?
Yeah, well, I think this is the asset which financial institution had in the past, right? So I think it's thinking about the past couple of years when we had the COVID, crisis, then the war at Ukraine started. It's those occasions when the banks or institutions as a bank can prove that their position and help people. And I think like we have big discussions and big activities starting at those periods of time when I think like it's great if the bank is able to respond to the situation and provide the help which is needed at the time, and it's flexible enough to do the things in different way. So I think like it's we can do and build the trust on the transactional base. So like money are moving from A to B, everything is running, the branches are open. But I think like it's much more connecting the activities of the bank to the outside world, to the society, and being really trusted partner with real actions supporting the people in the country.
Adele, when people seek simple answers in uncertain times, what role might artificial intelligence play in shaping their financial decisions? Could AI support emotional and financial well-being, or might it reinforce bias and disconnection?
Huge question. I'm not an AI expert. I would like to be, but I suspect we're all probably learning at the moment. So I guess what I would say is that, first of all, my understanding of AI is it has to be trained. It can't have been trained on what we've been doing over the last 3 years because it's not been public. So unless somebody has been feeding it information, if we have a leak in the system, then maybe AI knows. But otherwise, AI probably doesn't know how we consider financial well-being at the moment. But that doesn't mean that people won't have been turning to AI to ask it questions that are relevant to their financial well-being. And is that worse than turning to your friends and family? Because we know that they're not necessarily going to be trained, that they may have misinformation, they may have outdated information, they may simply be wrong, they may even be purposely obstructive for various reasons. Not all friends and family are particularly nice. So, I don't know, AI, it has a role to play, but I can't quite picture what it's going to be yet. I know it's going to be embedded in various tools. I know it's going to take away some of our jobs. I know it's going to give other people jobs. So from that point of view, whether we like it or not, it's going to actually influence people's financial well-being across security, freedom and pleasure. But is it going to solve all the problems? I suspect not. But if anybody in the audience has a thought on that, and if I'm allowed to turn it out, I'd love to know what other people think. Oh, there is a thought on this one. Okay. Right in the middle, just to be as awkward as possible. Sorry. But thank you for putting your hand up. I really appreciate it.
No, in the middle.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Iris Popescu. I'm an architect specialized in inclusive design and accessibility, and I run a Bucharest-based NGO called AMAIS. If you're interested in information on AI and the biases that it enhances, because it has been trained on our biases until now, you can look up Iuta Treviranus. She leads the Inclusive Design Research Center at OCAD University in Canada. And she has very interesting data on North America, US and Canada, related to how people with disabilities and also on a more intersectional lens are facing exclusion, especially in banking systems, because AI has already been embedded, and AI is not taking them into consideration in the first pool of evaluation for credits, for instance, for loans. So yeah, there is a problem right now, and there actually are programs to train AIs to be less biased. So.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And just because there was an academic word in there, which was intersectionality, that is basically when you look at combinations of potentially vulnerable characteristics such as gender and race and disability. So it's where those things combine. And I know I talked about gender as a vulnerability, which is in itself really, I should be very careful, but unfortunately we do know that in terms of financial outcomes, quite often women are vulnerable. Can I just say one more thing, because it just made me think of something. That The other thing that we should see, and which I would really like to see, is that we can start to imagine a world where we can really analyze social media data for the benefit of people. So going back to the question that you've just answered on influencers, I think if we can get computers to look at what people are talking about among themselves and do content analysis of that, then we can really start to build on our qualitative interviews on a much broader scale and in real time, and really start to see whether political things are making a difference, whether the economic situation of a country is making a difference, whether something at a local, regional level is making a difference. So that's quite an exciting possibility in the future.
And I will add on that, because I'm actually formerly head of research, and it's always like, when you ask the customers, you are prompting and you are starting the conversation yourself. And I'm totally with you that analyzing the natural content, when people are really looking for something what is really deeply interesting for them, is the right way and is actually the dream of every researcher. And with all this like AI tool which we have at the moment to our disposal, the conversation, for example, which are happening in our tools are exactly showing like what is really important from people. And then the nice comparison is then looking at the banking through the eyes of the customers, what they are interested in, and it's really much more easy work. It's about, for example, limits. It's about like easy stuff which we consider as a feature of something, while our discussion in a bank are totally about different topics. So it's nice to actually to balance those views and maybe highlight what is important for people, and maybe also make our work less technical, because some people or most of the people doesn't utilize all the features which we have at our disposal. Speaking about the language, but the few features at the top are extremely important for masses. So I think like the comparison and the technology behind an AI, understanding or showing us what are real people interest, is extremely enriching our data and understanding of our clients and the audience.
There's a question for Adele on a Slido today. Volkshilfe, which is a huge NGO, announced that 60% of Austria's population worries about the affordability of care. What role does health and care play in financial well-being?
It's such an important topic, isn't it? And it's definitely not unique to Austria. Health plays a really key role in financial well-being and in well-being. People's health changes over time, and that has a big implication. And it's not necessarily changing to the extent that they need care. We also know that care needs are sometimes met by individuals, sometimes they're met by whole families. So sometimes you have one person needing care and lots of people providing care, and they're trying to work, trying to juggle their lives. So whilst the question might be about trying to cover the cost, care in itself happens at various different stages throughout life, and often we don't have a cost, we actually have an opportunity cost, if you like. So it's somebody giving up something else, usually their free time, in order to provide that care. So it's a really complicated topic when you start to talk about financial well-being, and it's not a straightforward financial decision. It's not necessarily, will I have enough money in order to go into this care home or use this nursing facility in old age? It happens throughout life, and it happens at various transitions. But it's definitely related to financial well-being.
Thank you. So it's your turn again. Are there further questions? Before the coffee break, there was such an outrage. Now you have Adele on stage, so she can answer your questions on behalf of the research team. Okay, if not, I'm going to ask another question we have for Petja. What specific tools or partnerships could regulators initiate to improve financial well-being, especially for those who don't engage proactively?
Well, regulators have to understand, well, first of all, what is the financial well-being and to evaluate that regularly. We have started quite a big survey with 55 items and questions aiming at how individuals manage needs and obligations, cope with negative shocks, but after all also how they perceive aspirations, which was also very much the focus of the research of Leonore, and capture goals and opportunities, and how they feel satisfied. So this thing of I feel well and confident about my financial life, pardon me, but my voice is disappearing, so this hopefully will keep for L. So I think once we have understood the particular financial well-being metrics or situation of the country, we have to implement it for every intervention as a measurement scale and make sure that our interventions are assessed based on that. And specifically for the ones who don't want to engage, we need to implement integrated measures together with, as I said, multiple stakeholders, not just from the one side saying, I will educate you, but combine, for example, education of the kids with education of the parents, and in that way reach them out, because otherwise they would not be interested to engage on their working space. But when you teach the kids and offer them to engage there, they're very much interested. So we need to include in every of that intervention those integrated approaches where we have multiple stakeholders and build upon existing trust in order to reach those who are either not active enough or are disbelieving or already not interested or particularly disconnected in certain areas.
Can I just come in on that one? Because I think it's really interesting that often we know that some people don't want to change things, but often people do actually want to start saving, and they say, oh, I can't, I don't have enough money, I can't possibly do it, but I quite like to do it. I wish somebody would help me. And there's been research that's surveyed people and found that lots of people will say, yes, I'd like to save, and then you offer them a savings account and they don't take it up. Or they open it, but they don't put any money in it. And this is why auto-enrollment has come in, because it's meeting a need that people say they have. And it's using the understanding of people's behaviours to say, if you really, really don't want it, then you can say no and opt out. But if you are just one of those people that goes, well, maybe I'll have it, maybe I won't, if you already have it, you can use it. And research in the UK from Nest Insight has really shown how people can be given these accounts and use them. And I think this is really key, because certainly in the financial inclusion world, which is really associated in some ways, it's not enough to just give somebody an account. Getting them to really use it is really part of the thing. So if you're attaching saving to payroll and the money's automatically going into the saving, but it's as easy as clicking a button to take it back out again, and people can really use those savings to meet some urgent need or to cover some cost that they didn't expect that month, they really start to understand the benefit of saving. So it has this positive spiral in effect. So they may have been somewhat keen, but rather unwilling to put any effort in, and magically something is happening that's increasing their security, potentially increasing both their freedom and their pleasure as well. And it's making their workplace seem like a really great place to work, because people are a little bit happier because their financial well-being's a little bit higher. So it's a win-win-win-win-win. That's got to be a good thing.
Okay. We have a question in the room too.
Hi, Maribel from Erste Foundation. Thank you. I just was thinking that, listening to you and the results of the study, I thought there is a bit of a catch-22 somehow for banks, I mean now. Because on one hand, people apparently think of money as just a necessity to, in the end, do what they really want to do, buying a yacht or being just feeling secure or having some fun. Which is actually, I think, anyways, what money was meant in the first place when it was invented. Yeah, so it's an exchange thing for the real thing. So I think it's not so stupid at all. But for banks, or or let's put it this way, when I heard that people who are in trouble wouldn't like so much to talk about money at all because it makes them uncomfortable, etc. This puts banks in a position like dentists, I would say, because on one hand you want good teeth, yeah. So it's and actually if you don't have to go there, it's perfect because everything is running fine and smoothly, and you are well off. On the other hand, you have to go there if something is not so well. So my question would be a bit, how to come out of this catch-22 in a way, because you have to nudge people to do the proper things, but those who have to be nudged and don't have to be another portfolio in the private banking sector, they will not show up, and the dentist thing, I would say.
Monica, maybe you want to answer that.
Yes, from the perspective of bank. And you got it right, perfectly right, because I think it's a doctor, dentist, or whatever. And it's finding the way how you can do it and not, repel people. So you have to do it in a tiny bits. You have to, it's perfect if we are able to reward people for the healthy habits. The doctor, so I think they can give you the toothbrush for free, and we are thinking like how to reward in a financial way the things which are good and relevant. So I think it's really applying the principles of the behavioral psychology on the financial products in a way which is really supporting the good habits and building them, and convincing people step by step that those things are not so difficult. And back to Adele, those things are actually digestible, they are small, they don't cost you so much effort, and it's not so painful. So I think in the past, when we had the interactions were happening in a branch, this was really I am coming there, my finances are not in a good order, what could I expect? It's actually ultimately a negative experience, or at least I am feeling really bad. And it's also the combination of people, the level, it's totally different, because as a banker, you are having all the knowledge available and you see all the money in front of you. And then as a client, you are, maybe your profession is dentist, but not the finance for sure. So it's actually making the disbalance smaller. So I think on the bank side is about choosing the language which is understandable, also decreasing the barrier. So even the seating is now being changed in order to sit on the same side. So I will not sit in front of you, blocked by the table, but I will try to sit next to you, and then we can both share the same screen or tablet and show the things. So actually, reducing the things which can highlight my proficiency or the side. So those things. And then I think with the technology, this is coming much better, because it's not once a year, the disaster, but it can be every day. And then you can find, the positive and the negative things, and you can balance them. So I think on the interaction level, on the personal level with each customer, the technology actually offers you plenty of the tools which are really enjoyable and which are in your pocket, where you anyway check anything. So looking at my kids, which are almost sleeping and waking up with a mobile phone, but everybody does, even my 84-year-old mom. So when she's checking the Facebook or whatever she's doing there, she can also check the balance, or she can get the tiny notification that maybe she can check something. So I think this is the technology which plays in our favor and in favor of the clients if we utilize it right.
There's another question on Slido addressed to the researcher. In which way the cultural and social background of people impact the triad and the balance between the components?
Oh, gosh. I would like to give a microphone to the people at the front on this one, please, if I may. Would you like to?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yes,
I
think we have
the
to
microphone to Pello in the front row, please.
Thank you.
Hi. It's hard to answer in one sentence. But,
please try.
But in essence, I can actually say in one word, yes. All of these things influence. What we can't say is how much and specifically which kind of format. social norms influence everything in different formats. The family structures influence financial well-being and understanding of it. All of the aspects of life and individuality, whatever is around you, influences financial well-being. It's hard to say that when you are in a certain group of community, it's only security. Even though we found a couple of examples, I can give one interview that made me a little bit cry while analyzing. But we have also in the bunch of the interviews, we have quite many that are tear-jerkers in that sense. They touch you on a much more different level because we focused on understanding the diversity. So there's a person who has been transitioning in their own country, in a country where they can't do that properly. And their only format of actually increasing or improving or whatever we want to call it, because the financial well-being wasn't like bad on their life, was actually figuring out how to move away from home. And that's something that we can see, that the different elements of life and different situations that people are having around the homeness, the feeling of safety, feeling of pleasure in that sense also, is so difficult to pinpoint that it will only focus on pleasure, security, or freedom. It influences all of those angles, and it depends how they get support. Gladly, luckily, that person got the chance to move away and increased, based on the interview, it was clear to understand that the freedom part, freedom to live their life in a way that they wanted to live, increases a lot when they move. So there are different stories. I can keep on going and going. I'm not going to do that. But all of those things influence. What we can't say at the moment is like how much and what element exactly. But I think when we move, like what Leonore also mentioned, there might be this better pan-European longitudinal study to actually start seeing these things. And this longitudinal understanding doesn't mean that let's just keep on asking these 9 statements. But we need to see into the other diversities of human beings. And also maybe academia also should stop asking about people's lives from binary perspective. Because already Adele mentioned that gender is much more bigger spectrum. All of the other parts are also on a spectrum. If you ask a person about family, family is more than mom, dad, and 2.5 kids, and the half being dog or a cat. So there are so many things, and they need to be included when we start actually measuring and assessing what's the situation. I don't know if that actually answers the question.
Okay, no, thank you very much. One last chance, one last question. Yes, please, the lady in the white T-shirt.
Hi, my name is Xue Yi, and I'm a researcher working for Open Future Lab, which will be introduced later, so stay tuned. I have a question regarding this research. So I know, if I understand it correctly, so research provides a holistic point of view from people, like how they understand what's the perception of financial well-being. And also you pointed out this general well-being and this bidirectional influence on financial well-being. And I wonder, out of my own curiosity, in your data, is there something you find can shed light on how that neurodivergent people perceive financial well-being? Because as far as I know, this topic is underexplored, and I'm just curious if there's something from your research.
It isn't something that we have been able to explore with the data we have. It is an area that is starting to get research attention. It's something that I've mentioned a little bit in recent research that I've done on financial inclusion in the UK. There's some research coming out of the research centre that I work at in the UK. So at the moment I can't talk about it. But yes, it's definitely a topic, not specific actually to financial well-being, but certainly to financial behaviours. And there are so many questions to be asked. One is whether you look at people who are diagnosed or self-diagnosed, whether you look at neurodivergence as being a category or as many categories. So there are so many things we don't know, but what we do know is that it will help people to understand differences, and I think anything that helps us to understand differences will help not just the group that we're looking at, but actually lots of other groups as well. So if we see how we can help one group, it's likely that that will have implications that help us with something else. So it's definitely ongoing, but unfortunately not something that we've been able to pick up in the data. We did have some neurodivergent people, but not enough to say anything.
So there's a lot to work on in the future.
Still a lot to work on, yeah. I think that's a consistent message, isn't it? Research never stops.
We've talked about systems and structures, but in the end, financial well-being is deeply personal. A question to Monica and Petja. Have you tried the self-assessing tool yourself? And if so, what did you learn about your own relationship with money?
You want to start?
I can start. Yeah, well, yes, I did. And you know, like I'm working in a bank, but my understanding was that you know, like sometimes my personal finances, I don't think so much about them. I just take it more automatically, and I don't spend time, you know, just thinking about what particular piece of that brings me pleasure or what is the security. So the tool for me actually was kind of like coaching tool, like what can play a part, and that it's great to spend some time thinking about own finances in this broader way. So I think like having some mental you know, like check or thinking about the own financial situation actually destroy the blind spot people might have, you know, like because we take it automatically, we maybe understand the finances when it doesn't goes well, or when we have the extremely positive stuff, or something ends as, you know, I repay the mortgage or something. But I think this regular check and thinking about the context of own finances was the biggest wow for me from the tool.
Mm-hmm. What would you like to share with us?
Well, I like the pictures. I really like them. So I don't know who did it, but you're great. I think big kudos. It's not so easy to make good pictures, I have to tell you. Yeah. So we're working a lot with a lot of surveys and stuff. It's brilliant. Thank you for that. I learned that. Well, I'm most probably too much into that area, so I was like, yeah, exactly, and I have to do that and exactly. So it was the self-confirmation that all the thinking pays off, but I learned that pets are not only pets, but they can be a financial burden or happiness, I don't know. So for me, it's comprehensive, it's easy, it's approachable, and it gave me the awareness, and I think that's the most important. I can agree with you. So I don't think that the word for me was just having a number at that moment, but really doing that journey, having the awareness and keeping in mind. And I believe the combination of nice representation with the questions which make you think is deeply rooted emotionally, not only rationally, and that was my learning out of it. Yeah.
I learned about myself that security is much more important to me than I thought. I thought I was all about freedom and pleasure, but turns out it's differently.
That's about gender biases. Yeah. That's about gender biases.
Maybe that's my gender bias. Thank you very much. Please give a warm round of applause to our panelists. Many thanks to the research team, to all our panelists, and especially to Marianne Schlögl from Erste Foundation, for making this event not only possible, but truly special. We've heard that already from the audience. We invite you to meet Open Future Lab and explore how combining design and research can be transformed into actionable insights for financial life. We will now show you a short movie and then ask you to accompany us in the foyer. For those who follow live via live stream, we have to say goodbye now after the movie. You can see the movie, but then the show is over. All the other participants, please, we meet outside in the foyer. It was a pleasure to be your host this afternoon. Thank you for your thoughtful attention, and I wish you all a stimulating evening of conversation, connection, and curiosity. Goodbye.
Short-term thinking, putting quick gains over lasting solutions. Stability has become a luxury. Nearly half of all people live paycheck to paycheck. young adults only dream of owning a home. Technology disrupts our work and what we think. All of this increasingly divides our world, split between those who can plan for tomorrow and those struggling to make it through today. But it doesn't have to be this way. By thinking long-term, we plant the seeds of resilience, financial security, and collective peace of mind. We can lead with courage and compassion and shape a future that lasts. That's where Open Future Lab comes in. Initiated by ERSTE Foundation, Open Future Lab is a research and design unit dedicated to long-term financial well-being, shaping a tomorrow where people have the freedom and joy to decide how they live. We explore bold ideas and share fresh insights to spark new thinking. Through practical interventions and carefully designed prototypes, we help raise awareness and drive meaningful change. We co-create with people, communities, organizations, and change makers who dream of a better tomorrow. Because this is how change begins. With a bold vision, the right people, and a commitment to build a future we'll be proud to pass on.